So I went out to football practice yesterday. Really interesting just in terms of like sensory reactions out at practice yesterday. It was 8 a.m. practice. We got out there at about 7:40 and temps were in the low to mid 50s. I'm used to going to football practice in August when it's 104 and you can't breathe. This was nice to have like a chill in the air to go watch some practice. We were able to go up on the balcony of the players' lounge and watch for about 25 minutes as the team went through drills. As you're all, I think, very well aware now, we're not learning anything earth-shattering out there, specifically not in the first open spring football practice. But one of the things that I did take note of, and I wrote in my practice report over at louisianasports.net, was the look of the quote-unquote, and I very much use air quotes here, of the first team offensive line that we saw. It was the group that was out there with Garrett Nussmeier, out there with Caden Durham, out there with Trey'Dez Green. You had your returning receivers, Chris Hilton, Aaron Anderson, and Xavion Thomas. But the offensive line did not look exactly the way that I thought that it might look. You did have over at left tackle Tyree Adams, which he played in the Texas Bowl there at left tackle. Paul Mabenga played left guard. DJ Chester was the starting center for the first team, and I very much expected to see Braylon Moore there. He actually ran with the second team. Bo Bordelon was the right guard, and then the former five-star Weston Davis was the right tackle. So that was the look. Tyree Adams, Paul Mabenga, DJ Chester, Bo Bordelon, and Weston Davis. And so I looked at that and I'm going, okay, that's a lot of guys that have been in the program for a year or two, that were highly recruited, that have been with Brad Davis, that were his hand-picked guys. And that's kind of where LSU will start here in the spring. And Brian Kelly went to the microphone just after practice was over and talked about replacing what is 4 starters on the offensive line that have moved on and are out of eligibility now, and how he sees that as a big piece to what they're doing in the spring.
We lost them after the Oklahoma game, is kind of how we looked at it. And then we went to work against Baylor with kind of developing a new group. And we feel like, it wasn't really 4 out of 5. It was like trying to find a couple of guys to fill in there.
And that's probably fair because you feel like Braylon Moore is going to be the center and you feel like Josh Thompson is going to start. I can't tell you if it's at left guard, right tackle, right guard. Like, I'm not certain where he's going to be, but you feel like those 2 guys, Power 5 starters, are going to come in and start. So if you got those 2 guys and potentially DJ Chester, who was a starter, maybe at one of the guards, like, you really do only have 2 spots there, and that makes sense in terms of what he's saying there. Now, Brian Kelly was asked, okay, well, what are your early thoughts on, like, what those guys look like at this point?
I think Braylon's done a nice job early on. Kyrus Kern, Solomon, both of the freshmen have done a really nice job. I think they're physically able. They've got to be able to take the next step in terms of learning, the offense. But they're going to be really good SEC players. The bar here is pretty high, right? These are really good players that in time are going to help us. I think Weston Davis is doing a nice job. We're going to rely on the guys that got a lot of work for us last year. DJ Chester's gotten a lot of work for us. We'll see where that all ends up. But I think there's enough experience with young players that we're going to put together a really good offensive line.
I'm going to work off of 2 knowns in this take, quote unquote, on the offensive line. 2 things that I know. One is that Will Campbell has set himself up to be a very high first-round pick. LSU hasn't had one of those in 30 years. Okay? Emory Jones is going to be a pretty high pick. And Miles Frazier and Garrett Dellinger started a ton of games. Like, those are knowns. And LSU has not been a factory of NFL offensive linemen, especially in high picks. Yes, if you look in the league right now, Lloyd Cushenberry's doing a great job. Yes, Trey Turner had a nice go of it. Leo Collins has had a nice go of it, certainly. You look at Damian Lewis, who's made a name for himself. Will Clapp just signed with the Saints again. Like, there have been guys that go to the NFL. Joe Barksdale had a good run of it. But it has not been early round draft picks, and Will Campbell's going to be one of those. And because of that, I feel like it's likely that LSU takes a bit of a step back on the offensive line. Now, I'll work off another known. Brian Kelly has got a template that he recruits to on the offensive line that has churned out pros at an amazing level. And Brad Davis has a great pedigree as a position coach. So you feel like, based on the guys they've brought into this program, that Kelly has checked off on and that Davis has handpicked and that he's going to develop, you feel like there's a reasonably good chance that LSU is going to field a pretty good offensive line. And I thought that LSU did a good job on the offensive line in the Texas Bowl. It helps to have a real veteran quarterback back there who quite literally gets the ball out of his hands as fast as anybody in college football and can help with protections and quick releases and quick decision-making. That helps an offensive line. But he can't make them run block, and that's got to happen quickly. And so that's Brad Davis's task here, to take this group and try to get them up to speed as quickly as he can in terms of running the football. And they're going to look at a lot of different variations. You're not just going to see DJ Chester at center. You're going to see him some at guard. That we know. You're going to see, I believe, Josh Thompson move around. I think you're going to see different guys at left and right tackle to get a look. What does Weston Davis look like at right tackle? What does Tyree Adams look like at left tackle? Okay. Carius Curran's backing him up at left tackle. Do we want to see if Josh Thompson can play one of the tackle spots? Where's Cohen Eccles in this mix? They really liked what he did leading up to the Texas Bowl. So there are a lot of different things they're going to look at, and that's why Brian Kelly made sure to say, hey, don't necessarily go right to the rotations, not just with the offensive line, but with every position group on the field. And he mentioned that in his press conference after practice.
There's not a lot that I would read into, like, who's in the first group, who's in the second group. We're still sorting out, rotations, things of that nature. So, again, we're nowhere near, like, this is the group that we're rolling out for the opener against Clemson. It's going to be a new rotation on Friday, so you'll get a chance to see a lot of different guys.
And I'll be on the lookout for that. I wrote in my practice report the two offensive lines that went out there, because in a 25-minute effort where you've got most of the guys working on technique against cones and bags, guys in a formation is probably the most noteworthy thing you're going to be able to write about in that 25 minutes that you have out there. Like, I could tell you, man, look at that explosive move into the sled by Patrick Payton. Wow. That's not necessarily very... We know that Patrick Payton, who's a fifth-year college football player, can move the sled, okay? Wow. Whit Weeks and Harold Perkins aren't out there. Well, you pretty much knew that. I wrote it anyway, but you pretty much knew that. You probably learned something when I write on the Louisiana Sports Line. Hey, this is what the first-team offensive line looked like. That's what the second-team offensive line looked like. But we'll juxtapose that with Friday's lineup and see just how different it is. If DJ Chester is at left guard on Friday, well, you'll know, well, they're just kind of cross-training. They want to see how both of those look. And I think that's exactly what the spring is for. LSU doesn't have to do installation to a strong degree in the spring. You certainly are putting some things in. You're making sure that your guys are on the same page, but you're not a new coordinator on one side of the ball that's got to install the entire game philosophy, the principles, the identity of one side of the ball in this spring workout. You don't have that. You've got Blake Baker back. You've got Joe Sloan back. This is about finding the personnel that fits into the scheme that you've already put together, and they're working on that on the offensive line. I'm concerned because you lose so many starts and a high draft pick. I'm encouraged by the fact that the track record from Brian Kelly and Brad Davis is good. And you look at the guys and how they were evaluated by those who do such a thing when they're in high school, you feel like you've got some talent there. They've got to figure it out and continue to work through it. And that's what this spring drills are for. And that's what I wrote about on Tuesday morning, and that's what we'll look at coming up on Friday. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.